My name is Alina, and I spent 12 years believing that love meant sacrifice. I thought it meant making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I thought it meant swallowing my pride, my anger, my voice, because keeping the peace was more important than keeping my dignity. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but I was especially wrong about the man I married. His name was Marcus, and for over a decade, he made me feel like I was lucky to be tolerated, like I should be grateful he stayed, even as he chipped away at everything I was. This is the story of how I stopped being small, how I stopped being grateful, and how I bought the house he threw me out of, and made him pay rent to live in it. The day Marcus threw my clothes out of the house, it was raining. Not a gentle drizzle, but the kind of rain that soaks through everything, cold and relentless, turning the world gray and bitter. I came home from work to find my belongings scattered across the front lawn like trash dresses draped over bushes, shoes half buried in mud, my winter coat lying in a puddle near the driveway. For a moment, I just stood there, my keys still in my hand, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Then, I saw him, Marcus, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his face set in that expression I'd come to know so well, cold, dismissive, done with me. He didn't yell, he didn't explain. He just looked at me like I was something he'd finally worked up the courage to throw away. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking, though I already knew. "You're out," he said simply. "I'm done. Pack up whatever's left and go." I felt something crack inside me, but it wasn't my heart. It was something deeper, something that had been bending and bowing under the weight of his contempt for years. I looked at my clothes, soaked and ruined, and then back at him. He was still wearing his wedding ring. I was still wearing mine. "This is my house too," I said, trying to sound strong, trying to sound like I had any power left. He laughed, actually laughed. "Your name's not on the deed, Alina. This is my house. My parents helped me buy it before we even got married. You've just been living here. Now you're not." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg him to reconsider, to tell me what I'd done wrong, to give me a chance to fix it. But I didn't. Because somewhere in that moment, standing in the rain with my life scattered across the lawn, I realized something. I was done too. Done trying to earn his love. Done shrinking myself to fit into his idea of what a wife should be. Done. I gathered what I could salvage, stuffed it into garbage bags, and left. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I just drove away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, my chest filled with something that felt like grief but tasted like fury. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel, lying on a bed that smelled like cigarettes and regret, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I'd spent making that house a home, the garden I'd planted, the walls I'd painted, the meals I'd cooked in that kitchen, the laughter I'd tried to create in those rooms. Even when Marcus barely acknowledged me, I thought about how none of it had mattered, how he'd erased me with a single afternoon of cruelty. And then I thought about something else, something that made me sit up, my heart pounding with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Marcus was wrong. My name wasn't on the deed, but that didn't mean I was powerless. That didn't mean I couldn't fight back. That didn't mean I had to accept this humiliation and fade quietly into the background of his life. I opened my laptop, still damp from the rain, and started searching. Divorce lawyers, financial advisors, real estate law. I read until my eyes burned, until the sun started creeping through the motel curtains, until I had the beginnings of a plan. Marcus had thrown me out, but he had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Section 2, Discovery. First signs the divorce was brutal, but I'd expected that Marcus fought me on everything's savings, furniture, even the dishes. He acted like I'd been a parasite, like I'd contributed nothing to our marriage, even though I'd worked full-time for most of it and put thousands of dollars into renovations and repairs on his house. His lawyer was aggressive, painting me as vindictive, money-hungry, and desperate. I sat through those meetings with my jaw clenched, my hands folded in my lap, letting them spin their narrative, because I knew something they didn't. I was playing a longer game. My lawyer was better than Marcus's, though he didn't realize it yet. She helped me document everything, every dollar I'd spent on the house, every improvement I'd made, every mortgage payment I'd contributed to, even though my name wasn't on the deed. We built a case not for ownership, but for reimbursement. And when the judge finally reviewed everything, Marcus was ordered to pay me a settlement, not enough to make me whole, but enough to matter. Enough to start over. I moved into a small apartment, cheap and temporary, nothing like the house I'd lost. I worked overtime, picked up freelance projects, and saved every penny I could. I stopped going out, stopped buying anything that wasn't essential. My friends worried about me, said I looked tired, and asked if I was okay. I told them I was fine, and I meant it, because I wasn't tired from defeat. I was tired from building. During the divorce proceedings, I'd learned something interesting. Marcus's parents had helped him buy the house, but they'd also put a lien on it, a loan that Marcus was supposed to pay back but never had. When his father died a few years ago, his mother inherited that debt, and she'd been trying to collect. Marcus had been dodging her, making excuses, playing the victim. He was financially irresponsible, always had been, but he'd hidden it well behind the facade of that house. I also learned that Marcus had been living beyond his means for years. The house looked impressive from the outside, but he was drowning in credit card debt, personal loans, and a mortgage he could barely afford. He'd kept it all hidden from me, managed the finances himself, always deflecting when I asked questions. Now that I wasn't there to contribute, he was sinking fast. I started watching the property records. It's all public information if you know where to look. I saw the missed mortgage payments, the late fees, and the notices. I saw him refinancing, trying to stay afloat, taking out equity loans that only dug him deeper. He was desperate, though he'd never admit it. And then, one morning, I saw the listing. The house, my house, the one he'd thrown me out of, was going into foreclosure. The bank had started the process, and Marcus had 90 days to either pay up or lose it. I felt my heart race. Felt that same clarity from the motel room flood back through me. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, working toward, planning in the quiet hours when everyone thought I was broken. I called my financial advisor, the one I'd been working with for months. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's make an offer." Section 3, Escalation, Planning, Gathering, Proof. Buying a foreclosed property isn't simple, but I'd done my homework. I spent weeks working with my advisor and a real estate attorney, understanding the process, and the legal requirements. I learned about redemption periods and equity of redemption, about how foreclosure auctions work, and about how to structure an offer that the bank couldn't refuse. I also learned that Marcus had no idea any of this was coming. He'd buried his head in the sand, convinced he could charm or bully his way out of trouble like he always had. He'd ignored the notices, the warnings, the final demands. He thought the bank would give him more time, that someone would bail him out, that the universe owed him a pass. He was wrong. I attended the foreclosure auction on a cold Tuesday morning in November. It was held at the county courthouse, a bland, fluorescent-lit room filled with investors and real estate flippers, people who saw properties as numbers on a spreadsheet. I sat in the back, my hands folded in my lap, my expression neutral. I'd dressed carefully professional but understated, nothing that would draw attention. When the auctioneer called out the address, my address, I felt my pulse quicken. The bidding started low. A few investors threw out numbers, testing the waters, but I could tell none of them were serious. This was a small property in a modest neighborhood, not the kind of thing that drew competitive bids. I waited, watched, let the room settle, and then, when the auctioneer was about to call it, I raised my hand. My bid was higher than necessary, but I didn't care. I wanted this clean, final, undeniable. The room went quiet. The auctioneer looked at me, then around the room, waiting for a counter. Nothing. He called it once, twice, 3 times. Sold. I walked out of that courthouse with the deed to the house Marcus had thrown me out of. The house where I'd planted gardens and painted walls and tried so hard to build a life. The house that was supposed to prove I was nothing, that I had no claim, no power. It was mine now. The next step was eviction. Marcus still lived there, still slept in the bed we used to share, still walked through rooms that were legally no longer his. My lawyer sent him the notice. He had 30 days to vacate. I imagined his face when he opened that envelope. Imagined the disbelief, the rage, the desperate scrambling, but I wasn't done, because evicting him would have been satisfying, sure, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more than satisfaction. I wanted him to understand, viscerally, what he'd done. I wanted him to live with it. So I made him an offer. Through my lawyer, cold and professional, I proposed that instead of evicting him, I would allow him to stay as my tenant. He could rent the house from me, month to month, at market rate. My lawyer thought I was insane. "You're giving him an out," she said. "Just kick him out and be done with it." But I knew Marcus. I knew his pride, his ego, his desperate need to maintain appearances. He'd rather pay me rent, rather humiliate himself month after month, than admit to his friends and family that he'd lost the house, then admit he'd been foreclosed on, outsmarted, beaten by the wife he'd thrown away. He accepted. Of course he did. The first time Marcus handed me a rent check, I thought he might cry. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. My lawyer present, to keep things civil. Marcus looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn. He'd aged in the year since I'd left. Stress carving lines around his eyes and mouth. He slid the check across the table without looking at me. His hand was shaking. "This is temporary," he said, his voice tight. "I'm getting back on my feet. I'll buy the house back from you." I didn't respond. I just picked up the check, folded it neatly, and put it in my purse. My lawyer had advised me not to engage, not to gloat, not to give him anything he could use against me later. But I couldn't help myself. I looked him in the eye, really looked at him, and I let myself smile, just a little. "The lease is month to month, Marcus," I said calmly. "As long as you pay on time, and don't violate the terms, you can stay as long as you want." He flinched like I'd slapped him, because we both knew what I was really saying. "You're at my mercy now. You live in my house. You answer me. Everything you took from me, I've taken back, and then some." He left without another word, and I sat there for a long time, staring at my coffee, feeling something I hadn't felt in over a decade. Power. The months that followed were surreal. Marcus paid his rent on time. He had no choice. I'd made sure the lease was airtight, but I could feel his resentment in every transaction. He'd leave the check in the mailbox instead of handing it to me. He'd communicate only through terse emails. He stopped maintaining the yard, stopped caring about the house the way he used to, like he was punishing me by letting it deteriorate. But I didn't care, because every month, when that check cleared, I was reminded that I'd won. Not just the house, but something bigger. My dignity, my future. I eventually hired a property manager to handle the logistics, to create distance between us. I didn't need to see Marcus anymore, didn't need to watch him shrink. I'd proven what I needed to prove to him, and more importantly, to myself. One day, about 8 months into the lease, my property manager called. "Your tenant wants to break the lease," she said. "He's asking to be released early." I wasn't surprised. Marcus had finally reached his limit, finally accepted that he couldn't win this, couldn't outlast me. "Tell him he can leave," I said, "but he forfeits his security deposit, and he's responsible for rent until we find a new tenant." He was gone within 2 weeks. I sold the house 6 months after Marcus moved out, not because I needed the money, though the profit was substantial, but because I didn't need it anymore. It had served its purpose. It had been my revenge, my reclamation, my proof that I could take the worst thing someone had done to me and turn it into power. But holding on to it would have meant holding on to him, and I was done with that. I sold it to a young couple, newlyweds, full of hope and plans. I watched them walk through the rooms, talking excitedly about where they'd put furniture, what color they'd paint the walls. I thought about the version of me who'd once done the same thing, who'd believed that love and effort would be enough. I didn't tell them what the house meant to me. I just handed them the keys and wished them luck. With the money from the sale, I bought my own place, a small house across town. Nothing fancy, but mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. I painted the walls bright colors, planted a garden, and filled it with things that made me happy. I built a life that didn't require anyone's permission, anyone's approval, anyone's tolerance. I ran into Marcus one more time, about a year later, at a grocery store. He was with someone new, a woman who looked young and eager, the way I probably had once. He saw me, and I saw the flash of something in his eyes, shame, maybe, or regret, or just the memory of everything he'd lost. I nodded politely and kept walking, because the truth is, I didn't need him to suffer. I didn't need him to apologize or grovel or admit he'd been wrong. I'd already won, not because I'd humiliated him, though I had, but because I'd proven to myself that I was stronger than his cruelty, smarter than his arrogance, more resilient than he ever gave me credit for. He threw my clothes out of the house like I was garbage, and I bought that house, made him pay to live in it, and then sold it for a profit that funded my new beginning. Some people call it revenge. I call it justice. And it felt better than anything I'd ever felt in 12 years of marriage. If you've ever been thrown away, diminished, or told you don't matter, remember this: the person who underestimated you will live to regret it, and you'll live to thrive.